Okay, welcome everybody to our latest episode of Knattering with Knights. This week I welcome Nathan Gevao, a junior powerlifter from the UK. Hello Nathan.
Hello.
So just as a little overview guys, and I'm sure I can ask Nathan to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but just to give you a bit of background to who Nathan is. First of all, he's a former pupil of myself and Miss Jones. He was actually in the first ever class I taught at school. I was a fresh-faced 22-year-old. Nathan was in year 7 in my tutor class with a few other characters who might get a few mentions, I'm sure, over the course of the episode. And over the next 5 years at school, he grew into a very formidable athlete, although one that was considerably smaller than he is now, and also a high-achieving student academically. He was part of our best group of students in terms of their sporting achievements, regularly won local championships in basketball, volleyball, football, and swimming, all of which he was a key aspect of the team. Note he was a good athlete, but also nowhere near the size of strength he currently is. In my final year at school, Nathan, and in Nathan's year 11, he walked away with our Lifetime Achievement Award, which was reserved for somebody who had raised the bar of sporting success during the time they'd been at the school, which, if I'm right, Nathan, you'd been at the school in Kuwait since year 1?
Since reception.
Reception, so you were a complete... You went all the way through to the end of year 11, pretty impressive. And anything to add to that, Nathan? Have I undersold you in any way there in terms of a quick overview?
That's pretty accurate.
Good, nice one. And I say one thing I didn't mention there was Nathan was a student of mine in Kuwait, the British School of Kuwait, for the 5 years that I was there. So just to get an overview, Nathan, what was the journey that you took after you left Kuwait? Where did you go?
So after I left Kuwait, it was year 11 when I finished, and so I headed over to the UK over here, and I went to college in Winchester, which is near Southampton, because more people know that. So I moved over to college. I was doing boarding, sixth form over there, and that's what happened pretty much.
And in terms of the changes that you noticed between the UK and Kuwait, specifically within school, what was the kind of, obviously you'd been in Kuwait since you'd been in reception, must have been a big shift in culture for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, to be honest, I just wasn't really necessarily ready for that because I knew it was going to be a change in culture, but obviously having been in Kuwait and being at British School, I thought it wouldn't be that different really. But I feel like one of the biggest things was moving over academically, although there was also a big shift in the sporting aspects as well. Being in Kuwait, being in an international school, I'm sure it's the same over there. Academics are very heavily looked on. And so it was sort of a thing where everyone would sort of just look at you and be like, oh, you've got a B, how have you got a B? Everyone's obviously aiming for an A at all times. Everyone's gunning for it, just completely just competitive, driven, focused. And then you get over to the UK and you'll hear someone being like, oh, I got a C. It's so great. And it was just very, very different because I'm sat there thinking, how have you gotten a C and you're happy with that? But I think it became a much more sort of relaxed environment. Not necessarily that was a good thing, but it did just chill everything out a little. Didn't really change my mindset on things because I was still very focused in the same way I was in Kuwait. But when it came to sporting, I would say in Kuwait it was very different in that it was obviously a sort of 3-sport year that we did in Kuwait. So we obviously would have football, basketball, volleyball on a rolling basis during the year. And when I moved over to the UK, that changed very heavily as well because it became one sport for the entire year. And that meant that I essentially had to choose what I was going to narrow into. In Kuwait, at the end of sort of my time over there, obviously one of my mates, James, who you'll know, Pickard, he was very into rugby. He was Australian. And so we started to play rugby at a team in Kuwait for a bit. And so when I got over to the UK, I did try that for a little, sort of like as a secondary sport on top of the basketball that I decided to focus into, because obviously that was just my main sort of favorite sport back in Kuwait. I tried rugby for a bit and realized it was freezing outside, and I gave that up really, really quickly. So I stuck to my indoor sports and went back to basketball. I think basketball was very different because being in Kuwait, being in just being a part of that sort of Middle Eastern basketball sort of thing. For example, when we go over to BSME, which was the internet. Well, how do you describe BSME?
British Schools of Middle East kind of international tournament, yeah.
Yeah, so the international tournaments that we do, those were, we'd go over there and we just, most of the time, we would just destroy everyone. It was a thing where our team would be walking around and people would be coming up going, oh yeah, make sure you don't forget us. Make sure when you guys reach the NBA, you're like, and we're all just thinking, oh yeah, we are sick. We are just massive, just the best out here. And getting into the UK, realizing it was very much sort of, we were middle-sized fish in a very small pond. And I got over there and everyone else was a big fish. And it, it was very different because as soon as I got over, I realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Necessarily, it was not necessarily a shock because I was still working just as hard, trying to get better, trying to get to everyone else's level. But it did mean that sort of being the top wasn't it anymore. I was having to work quite hard. And on top of that, because I was a boarder, it meant that I got to bypass the trials for the team. Because the trials took place before I actually arrived. And so when I got in, the coach didn't really love the fact that I'd just been able to jump into the team without actually going through the trials. And so from day one, it was sort of a, you are going to be on the backseat until you prove yourself sort of thing, because I didn't pick you for this team. Or at least that's very much how it felt. And so I didn't really get much playing time at all, which sort of pushed me towards volleyball in my second year, because when I did my second year of college, so that was year 12, this is going into year 13. When I got to year 13, I was sort of thinking, okay, let me probably try giving a different sport a go. Maybe I should just, I know I've always been good at volleyball, let me give volleyball a try. And so I went over to the volleyball team, at which point the basketball coach happened to leave the college. And we ended up picking a new coach, but my volleyball coach told me that I wasn't allowed to go back because she wanted to keep me for the team. So I stuck to volleyball at this point and ended up playing volleyball throughout second year, and it went much better than my basketball sort of journey at the college went. We ended up getting to AOC championships over here in Nottingham, which is Association of Colleges, and we ended up coming third in that tournament, I want to say. So we did really well overall, which was really cool. And I managed to break into the first team relatively early, which was nice as well. And then, yeah, came over to uni after that.
So that's just very interesting to hear that story, because obviously when you left Kuwait your final year, I've got a vision of you in the basketball setup, and you're right, like you were part of a team that was very, very gifted relative to the standard that we had around us. But I also still think where I've been since then, specifically to basketball, that I thought the Middle East standard was really high. Actually, I always consider that some of the best school basketball setups, and I say you were one of those better players. So then to go to the UK and almost realise that you were not the main man anymore must have been a big shock indeed. And in terms of then other sports you were playing at school when you were with me, but then have moved to UK. So have you never then competed again in things like football, swimming? Is that just literally your last time competing was Kuwait for them?
So with football, I didn't really continue playing football competitively after Kuwait. I did want to dip my feet in it sort of at college and at uni as well. But the thing was, at college, because of the fact that it was such a one sport system, it just meant that I had to focus in on something. Mm-hmm. And so there's been times where I've done like 5-a-side with particular teams or whatever, and I've always fancied myself as a centre back. I love it. But I do also know that or at least I knew that I had to prioritize and I had to focus in. So it just meant that if I was going to be jumping on and trying something else out, for example, at the start of uni, when I got into uni, and I thought, oh, now I get to choose my sports all over again, like I did at college. It was a situation where I thought, okay, I could do football and just see how good I am now. But I also knew that I've been playing basketball and volleyball for the past 2 years, and to try and jump on another sport now and lose sort of the skill that I've gained in the past 2 years doing these other things would be detrimental to my ability. Just because even going back to Kuwait, for example, playing against some of the boys that I was with in the team, it was such a big difference going back to Kuwait and playing with everyone, because it was like, okay, being over here in the UK has made me so much better than I would have been if I had stayed over here, sort of thing, which was quite interesting. Because I agree, it being in the Middle East and being in other places, it does very much seem like we did have a really good setup. But then equally, people over here have normally been playing their sports since they're really young, because obviously basketball isn't the national sport of the UK per se at all. It's more of sort of a side sport along with volleyball. And so if you play basketball or volleyball in the UK, you more time will know someone who's played maybe in a completely different part of the country than you, and you've never met really. But as soon as someone says their name, you'll know of them, because it's such a small sort of community and everyone's been playing academy level since they were 5 years old, whereas we obviously dipped our feet in Saturday school for basketball once a week and then that would be it. So it was very although I could hold my own, I wasn't to the same standard as everyone else, and I definitely knew that. So yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, I haven't been raised in the UK myself. I know that as soon as you said the one sport system, I couldn't believe that you obviously went to a nicer college than I ever went to school. So I was interested to see if they would run something similar. I mean, my personal opinion was, as a teacher, I absolutely loved the multi-sport kind of seasonal thing when I went to the Middle East. I didn't originally. I first got there and was so confused as to why they would run something, but having seen it, having been there for just 1 year, I could see the benefit of that for the kids mainly, but also as a member of staff, it was just good, kept things fresh. And in terms of you then having been part of both systems, which one do you kind of prefer? And I think I probably know the answer, but
it's actually a difficult one to answer, to be honest, because although I really did love playing all three, the fact that coming over here and seeing how much everyone else developed on the one sport system just sort of makes me wish that I had had that one sport system as well. But equally, I like being able to jump in a game of football with a bunch of people and still hold my own against the rest of the team, even though I haven't played football in ages, because I've had all those years of experience. But just in terms of being competitive, because I am just so competitive, and it's always just, regardless of what it is, I just want to win. It's always been difficult to not be, I don't know, not difficult, but it's been, I've always wanted to be the best at something. And it's always been a situation where you're not necessarily the best at something, but you're above average at just a lot of things. And so I think I may have preferred to be in that one sport system and see just how far I could have really gotten. But yeah, I guess that's sort of changed now anyway, though. But yeah.
And in terms of then, so your attention kind of has shifted in the past couple of years to powerlifting. So what was the kind of initial interest in going down that avenue? And you know, maybe it might have been exposure to some weightlifting at CrossFit BSK, maybe. But you know, obviously, you've just, it seems to have just jumped out of nowhere for me. Obviously, we've not seen each other maybe 4.5 years, and I certainly wouldn't have had you down as a powerlifter before then. But no, just shed a little light on to how you got involved in that.
Yeah, so with powerlifting, it was a thing where probably I'd say the summer before I left Kuwait, or the summer where I was going to leave to Kuwait when I finished my exams, I knew that I was very close to being able to dunk in basketball. This is something I've been running for ages, just trying to jump up and get the ball into the rim. And it was something I'd always run. Like every year I was finding myself getting closer and closer to that point. And I thought, right, how do I improve this? Let me get in the gym. Let me get a ball. Sorry, not get a ball. Get a bar. Get it on my back. Just try and get a squat up. Hopefully that'll help me jump better, jump higher, make my legs stronger in general. And so I went down to a gym near my house. They actually told me I couldn't get in because I was too young, because I think I was 16 at that point, and they told me I wasn't allowed in because I think Kuwait's gym age is 18. And oh no, I would have been 16 or 17, no, 16, and the gym age is 18. And the guy said, no, you're too young. And as I was leaving, you obviously know Leo. Leo's dad happened to walk into the gym down the stairs randomly. I didn't even know they lived in this area, and he saw me. He was with Leo. He said a few words to the guy, and in Arabic, which also surprised me because I had no idea he understood Arabic. And the guy turns around and goes, "Yeah, you can come in." And so that was me into the gym. So Leo and I sort of ran a squat, sort of just general compound movement building program over the next few weeks before I actually came into the UK. When I did get to the UK, I ended up dropping all of that when I jumped into basketball and volleyball, and so I stopped going gym completely. But then, being brushed aside sort of with the team, I was kind of like, okay, what can I do to sort of improve my body, just get some sort of edge in basketball, just something that's going to push me that little bit more against all these other boys who are in the team with me. I was like, okay, let me start going to the gym again. One of the boys that I was in boarding with, Josh, he actually went to TES in Kuwait, which was surprising as well because we had no idea that each other were going to be at the same boarding house, and there were, sorry, not boarding house, but sort of boarding area, and there were only 40 boarders in this school because it was a state boarding school. And so we just randomly ended up bumping into each other. And so we started going to the gym together in January of first year of college, just doing 5x5 programs, so 5 sets, 5 reps, on the main compound lifts, and it started getting better and better. We got stronger and stronger, and then he eventually fell off, and so I had to sort of push myself to continue going, which just pushed me into doing more bodybuilding stuff. And so I was going to the gym and just doing a bunch of bodybuilding work, just general gym stuff, just a normal gym program, normal gym splits, and yeah. But because obviously I had been at CrossFit before doing all of this, it just meant that I was pretty competent in all of the lifts before I actually got to them. So before I got to the point where I was doing heavy squats and things in the gym at college, I already knew all the basics of how to do everything because I'd already been taught them beforehand. In PE at BSK, I remember I didn't have too much CrossFit exposure at BSK because I did pick the what was it, the other option where it was like endurance. The endurance option. When in the final year, I ended up picking the endurance option, but obviously we had a few CrossFit sessions before that anyway, and then we ended up doing circuits, and so I did have some sort of basis when I got in, and that just meant that I was quite confident handling myself in the gym and didn't have to worry about any of that. So when I actually did get down to it, all of this, all the gym stuff and everything was just very natural. So I was quite comfortable getting into all of it. But yeah, so that was the initial journey into sort of the gym. And then one of the gym sort of instructors who worked at the college gym saw me doing all my lifts and everything. He knew me because we'd been there for quite a while, and he just sort of went, "Oh yeah," because he was a weightlifter, an Olympic weightlifter. And he was sort of like, "Oh, you do like squat, bench, and deadlift. Have you ever looked at powerlifting?" And I was kind of just thinking, "Oh, well, I mean, whatever." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, you should look at it." And so I looked it up, and and I think at that time my squat was around 160 or something. This was mid first year, going into second year. My squat was around 160 kilograms. My bench was probably at like 92 kilograms, and then my deadlift was something like 190 kilograms. And and so I sort of took a look at that point my weight class was the 74 kilogram weight class, because powerlifting is split up into a number of weight classes for both men and women. And so at that time I was in the 74 kg weight class, which is just everything underneath 74, between I think 66 kilograms and 74. I was weighing in at about 69 kilograms, so probably midway through that class. And I took a look at the English records. I just happened to fall on the English records, so I was just wondering, obviously, what is the top of this division? And I looked at the sub-junior records, that's under 18, and I realized that I wasn't that far away from them, because it was something like a 165 squat and I want to say a 90 kilogram bench. The deadlift was too far for me to get to, but then the total, obviously all three lifts combined as well, I knew that I could potentially beat. And so for the next sort of year, it was a goal to sort of just push my squat, bench and deadlift just further and further until I could potentially touch that. I wasn't necessarily powerlifting because I was still playing volleyball throughout that year. I was just going to the gym and doing a few lifts here and there to try and sort of get my strength up, see how close I could get. And then at the end of year 13, when I was about to sit my A-levels, I managed to sign up for a qualifying meet in Southampton, where I went along. Sorry, let me explain that. So you need to do a qualifying meet to be able to do a national level meet, which the All England, the big meet that I wanted to do to break these records at, was gonna, so the All England is where you have to break the records, because you have to break the records at a national level meet. Okay. And so I competed in a qualifying regional meet, which is the level below national. And the regional meet had to be done to be able to do the national level meet. So I competed at this regional meet. I hit all my numbers. I qualified to compete in nationals. And so I went off to the All England, I think it was May. So literally like a week or two before my A-levels actually started. Got myself on a train, jumped on a bus, and then ended up spending the night in an Airbnb before my competition. Went the next morning, had a great day, and ended up breaking the squat, the bench, and the total record for the English, just the English records. And so I thought, yeah, I'm sick. I've broken these English records. This is huge. And then I get back to college and I tell this gym instructor, and he's all like, well, I mean, no one cares about the English records really. And I sort of thought, I was like, what are you talking about? We had like quite a good level of banter between us. So it didn't really, like, he wasn't being mean or anything, but he was sort of like, yeah, no one cares about the English records. It's the British records that matter. And I thought, well, I mean, it's an English record. Like, how different could those really be? Let me just gun for this now. And I looked up the English records and I looked at the British records, and the British record was way higher than what I had done. And I was sat there thinking, right, okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to be a sub-junior after this. I have to now go into the junior division, which is under 23, so between 18 years old and 23 years old. And I thought, there's no chance I'm ever going to touch any of those numbers, because those are so high. I think the squat went from my little 170 squat to a junior squat records for the 74 kilogram class of, it was something like 260. And it had taken me so long to hit 170. And I was thinking, there is no chance I'm going to be hitting 260 anytime soon. And so it sort of just made me think, okay, I'm not going to bother continuing with powerlifting, because that's too difficult. Let me go off to uni. Let me keep playing volleyball, because obviously that's what I've been doing now. And let me just focus in on that. And so that was sort of the plan.
Wow. So, and also just to consider here for the listeners that may be thinking these weights sound like small change, I've got a little bit of research here. So your most recent lifts, this was on your Instagram. So we got a 308 kilo deadlift, 308.5. I know that you guys take this seriously, those extras. So that's approximately the same weight as two giant pandas. So when he's deadlifting, two giant pandas. And then your back squat was 272 kilograms, which is the equivalent of 250 1 litre bottles of water. Pretty impressive, that. So yeah, just to give you a bit of background, me and Mr. Scott, who is one of my best mates anyway. So when we first started following your Instagram when you left school, and you were putting up some of these numbers, I remember messaging and going, have you seen Nathan's Instagram? And he was just like, I'm going to delete him soon because I can't process him lifting these numbers, it's making me feel inadequate. Because me and him, I went to uni with him, so we've known each other maybe 15 years, and we would go to the gym together. And I think between the two of us, our progression in numbers has gone up maybe, like, I don't know, I'd say like my back squat now is maybe like, without doing any powerlifting specific training, like maybe like 120, 130, and it's uni, it might have been 80. So like there, my progressions is 50 kilograms, and then you're like all of a sudden going in a gym and it's like instantaneous, boom, these massive numbers. So we were both absolutely heartbroken / very happy for you, but at the same time, feeling like, you know, we were half the human being. And yeah, just couldn't process it. And then the bench press. So when I was at BSK, in the morning, it was actually one of my birthdays. I can't remember what age I would have been, but I remember benching 225 pounds, so 100 kilo, and that's like the ultimate sticker of a man. And I was so happy. And then I saw your bench, and I literally was like, I don't think I've bench pressed ever since that day. And I mean, cause I was like, I'm done, I'm happy. And then you're chucking up 160, which is demoralising. So in terms of a powerlifting meet, you've kind of shed a little bit of light on how the kind of system works in the UK in terms of the, you know, qualifying in a regional event and then into a national event. How does the actual competition work in terms of the, I don't know, the order of the lifts and then how that equates to and how many attempts you get, etc. How does that work at a competition?
Right. So with a competition, you go in each lift. So obviously there's 3 lifts: squat, bench, and deadlift. And each lift you get 3 attempts. So you'll go on. You'll do your first attempt for, let's say you walk on and you're starting with your squat. You'll do your first attempt for your squat, and then everyone else will go. If you do your squat, you have to make sure it's below parallel. Your feet can't move, or at least they can't come off the ground. You're not allowed to, the bar has to go in a smooth path, so it's not allowed to shift back down when you're standing up with it. So it has to be all the way up, has to be straight up the entire way. And once that's done, you then move on, you go off, take your rest while everyone else does their first attempt, and then you come back on for your second attempt, and so on and so forth. You have a relatively decent break between your squat and your bench, and then the cycle continues. And then it's the same for your deadlift. You can change your attempts every now and then. So when it gets up to those sort of national level competitive events, so for example, this year for me, it would have been a situation where when it comes to the deadlift, those final few deadlifts, your coach or whoever's handling you for this meet, whoever's looking after you, changing your weight attempts and things, putting in your attempts, is playing with the numbers to try and confuse everyone else. So when you walk on, they might have, I don't know, 200 kilos down next to your name, and everyone else is sort of thinking, okay, so this is what he's squatted, this is what he's benched, put them together. Okay, so now maybe I need 300 kilos to beat him on the deadlift because he has 200 kilos down there. And so when you walk on, your handler will hand in your real attempt, which might be 270, and it'll change next to your name all of a sudden, and then that will fly up, and everyone else is confused, scattering, trying to figure out what to do, because all of a sudden your total is going to be so much bigger than theirs. And so they now have to figure out what they're going to do to lift more weight than potentially they even can, which is always fun to watch. But yeah, so that's how the competitions sort of work.
And so obviously the way you talked about it before as well was that you kind of almost went to your first meet like having just been going to the gym yourself, and this guy in the gym, the trainer in the gym, had kind of half hinted at powerlifting. You mentioned the fact that you could see you benching, deadlifting, squatting. And did you do that then, that program to get yourself up to kind of 170 back squat? Was that just independent? You just look up stuff on YouTube, Google, and just continue with your 5x5s? Is that just like self-led? Did you have any exposure to kind of coach at that point, or was that just all you?
Yeah, so with the initial boost up to that, those first numbers that I hit, that was purely gym stuff, with a mixture obviously of YouTube and Google, just getting information from everywhere. Obviously YouTube is a great tool for learning all of that stuff, but it can be a very dangerous tool at the same time, especially when you're getting people telling you things that they really shouldn't be telling you to do. But what I was running with, I was lucky enough to find the sort of resources that pointed me in the right direction. So I ended up looking at things that were saying, oh yeah, do a 5x5 program that's going to increase, and you put this up this much every week or every other session, and this much weight, sorry. And I'd go and do those lifts, and then I'd come back in the next week. It was very poor the way I was training initially, just because I would never warm up, for example. I would walk in on Monday morning, 8 a.m. after just waking up before college started, and I would do a 145 by 5, and then I would leave without warming up. I'd just walk in, do it cold, and leave. And the gym trainer guy would always go, "You are going to hurt yourself." And I would go, "No, I'm not." To this point, to be fair, luckily, knock on wood, I haven't, but I've also changed the way I train very much since then. Um, Definitely warming up all the time now, but really, realistically, getting up to those initial numbers, I was just running this 5x5 program, putting weight on the bar every time I managed to complete those 5 sets and 5 reps comfortably, and then it would just sort of continue with the cycle, just do 5x5, put weight on, go up again, until I sort of hit uni. I was running with that just by myself, independently. And then I got to uni and I joined a society, obviously the University of Nottingham Powerlifting Society, which I'm now the president of, to be fair. But first year, it was just coming in and just sort of lifting as I was. And then I got to about December time of my first year, and I met a guy who was just sort of, he was powerlifting as well, and he was in my weight class, and he would just constantly poke me. It was sort of like, oh yeah, when it gets to uni champs, I'm going to beat you. At this point, mind you, I had no idea what uni champs even was, but I just knew, I was like, forget all that I said earlier about not competing in this, because I'm not going to hit those records. I need to beat this guy. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to have this guy going on about how he's going to beat me. I need to beat him. And so the competitiveness just drove me to jump back on powerlifting maybe one last time. Uni champs turned out to be basically this big competition where all the uni lifters from all the societies would go, and it was basically just a massive meet where you'd go, you compete against everyone else in your weight class across the country, and obviously the best people would win. And my goal essentially became to beat this guy, and also to beat the other people in the weight class at my uni. And that was what I was gunning for when I got to uni champs. By the time I reached uni champs, I had dipped my toes into my first powerlifting program. So my first strength building program. It was called Candito, the 6-week version, and that allowed me to. It was obviously, as it says on the title, it's a 6-week program. It went into a very different sort of training style than I was used to, because up to this point I was only doing 5x5s, and that was it. And this program was telling me to do a first set of 4 reps, and then 5 sets of 8 reps to back off from that 1 set of 4 reps. And it was different weights and different rep schemes. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to follow it because it can't hurt me to do it. I mean, hopefully it's not going to make me any weaker. And then I walked into uni champs and I got personal records on all my lifts by about 20 kilos on my squat. It was 10 kilos on my bench, and then another, I don't know, I want to say it was another like 15 to 20 kilos on my deadlift as well. And at that point I was sort of thinking, right, okay, wow, this is actually really pushed me a lot. And then I decided after uni champs, all right, now that I've done what I said I wanted to do, I might as well try and run this program one more time. And while I was running this program, I just set up my powerlifting Instagram to sort of track my progress and track my lifts and everything. And one of the people I was following just dropped me a message. He was kind of like, hey, do you need a coach? Are you doing anything? You look quite strong, like blah, blah, blah. Now I know that's just how he approaches people, because he just wants to get you interested. But it was a good sales tip. So he jumped in my messages, said that, and I met up with him for a little coaching session later on in first year. and I then decided that I was going to continue with him. His name's Ben, and so I jumped on coaching with Ben, and from then it's just taken off basically.
Nice one. I still can't believe that just picking up a program off the internet had that impact for you. I wish I'd found the program. Because I remember like when I went to uni, that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I did 5x5 as well. Just didn't work out for me the same way. Right. So in terms of a daily routine for your training, so let's maybe take a kind of, well, this is not normal, I appreciate right now, but without kind of shedding too much light on the impact that COVID's had, like how much do you train a week or a day? What kind of things as a student? You know, I recall being a student, it was a while ago, but I'd imagine that if you're putting up numbers like that, you're going to have to sacrifice a few aspects of university life that I maybe didn't. So yeah, what kind of things has gone out the window, and what kind of things you do in a week to train for powerlifting?
Right, so I'll start off with the like sort of week in life. Basically, it'll be my current program that I'm running with is 4 days a week. I will train. The training sessions for powerlifting can be long. It's almost equivalent to training for a normal sport, how you'd have 1.5 hour, 2 hour sessions. Sometimes powerlifting sessions can go on for 3 hours. If, for example, I'm doing a full squat, bench, deadlift session, those are the longest for sure. But I will wake up in the morning, I will have my breakfast, and then I'll do all my uni stuff. In the evenings, most of the time, more often than not, it'll be around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I'll jump on the tram, head over to the gym, and then I'll do my session, which will last 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 1.5 if I'm lucky, normally 2 to 3 hours. And then I'll jump on the tram, come back, do whatever work I need to finish off for the night if I have any more work, or just mess about for the rest of the night. And that's pretty much how my training days go. When it comes to what I've had to sacrifice at uni, first year, really, there wasn't a ton of sacrifice just because our main uni nights were actually Wednesdays. And so on Wednesdays, we'd go clubbing. It would be Wednesday night clubbing. Thursday's a rest day for me anyway, which means I'm not doing any workouts on Thursday. And so I don't have to worry about holding it back on Wednesday night because I've trained Wednesday morning already. And so I go on Wednesday night, come back Thursday night, recover, and then Friday we just do the workout routine all over again. That started to change as I saw myself getting stronger. Although in second year, I did go in and run for the role of social secretary in the volleyball committee. However, I stopped playing volleyball in second year to focus in on my powerlifting. I did stay as the social sec, just meant that I was running events and things for the club where I would be the one who needed to be just with my head screwed on all the time. I'm sort of the dad looking after the entire thing, not drinking most of the time and just looking after everyone essentially, making sure the event is running smoothly, etc. So yeah, but apart from that, currently, or at least if it was going to continue the way it did at the end of last year, at the beginning of sort of this year, it was just purely rest days. You stay at home, you do your work, and then when it comes to training days, you go in, you do your training days as normal, and club nights take a very large backseat. Or if I am going out or just meeting up with people for a drink or whatever, it's very, very held back, because I got to a point where, especially when I was tracking my calories and things, when I am tracking my calories to make sure growth is happening, everything's good, my body's properly fed, I have to stay on top of what I'm putting in, obviously. So yeah.
Okay. And in terms of COVID, obviously I do see your Instagram, and the UK has gone into a second lockdown. So I've seen what you're up to, but so how have you kind of been able to maintain? So when we were in Hong Kong and we went into lockdown, gyms were closed. the one thing that was sacrificed probably was strength, because a lot of people don't have weights of a big enough number in their apartments to train indoors. They can probably maintain a decent level of cardio. You know, you can probably get out and do some proper good running. You can have enough stuff that you can implement, yet kind of impacting your body with lighter weights. But you, in your sport, need to be lifting big, and obviously not a lot of people have access to that in their apartments. How have you managed to maintain strength levels in the COVID lockdowns in the UK?
So in the first lockdown, it was difficult because going in, or at least going into it, was difficult because no one really knew what was going on. It was rumblings of, oh, they're going to lock us down, blah, blah, blah. And no one, a lot of people said, oh yeah, it's not going to happen. But then rumors started to increase. It started to get more and more believable. And then all of a sudden one day it was like, okay, the Prime Minister's jumping on TV. He's saying we're locked down. And it was, I want to say 4 weeks out from my competition that I was going to be doing as well. And he locked us down, obviously everything cancelled. And so we ran into the gym. We have a uni gym and we have a gym where our society does all of its sort of main lit competition training, because it has really good powerlifting equipment, powerlifting specific equipment, as opposed to the uni gym, which is more of a commercial, normalized gym that you'd find everywhere else. And so we ran over to this competition gym to try and get in a mock meet of the same standard that we would sort of have if we had actually done the real competition, with all the proper plates, because these plates are calibrated, which means they're just perfect to the correct number, whereas a regular gym plate might be off by 1 or 2 kilos or pounds from time to time. So we ran over to this gym and we did our max outs, and we were sort of like, oh, any chance you guys are going to be renting out equipment or anything? And the guy who runs the gym, Tom, he's a really nice guy. He was sort of like, oh, I don't know if I will, guys. I'll let you know if I do. And then we sort of went, okay, right, we're going to get a group of boys together and we are going to figure out how much money we can all sacrifice to bring in a squat rack, a bench, a bar, and some plates. And so we were all on Amazon looking things up. We found a squat rack, we ordered that in, managed to get it on Amazon Prime. So it was coming in, I think, 2 days after lockdown actually happened. It was the same with the bench. That was great. We got in mats too. And then I got a message on my phone from Tom, the gym owner, just saying, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to be renting out equipment if you do want it, because I know you guys asked for it. And so I was like, oh, thank you so much. Like, we'll come and pick that up. And so we ran back to Nottingham Strong, the gym, and we piled all of, I think, 240 kilos into one of my mate's cars. And we drove it all into the house, offloaded it all. And so we were training a mixture of in the garden and also inside in the living room. It was fine back then in the first lockdown because most of my housemates were gone. My brother William obviously came up from Southampton because he's at boarding over there now as well, and he came up and he was staying over here. And then it was pretty much just us up here, a lot with Nikki as well. And so us three were the only ones in the house, and so it was fine for us to do whatever pretty much. And that just meant that it was just groups of us training, or at least I'll say that it was about 1 to 2 of us training at a time. We sort of split it up so that people weren't really in contact with each other as much as possible, and we sort of split routines and things. But we managed to get all of our sessions done. Everyone managed to get it in. We had all the plates and everything, which was great, and so we just kept it going. This time round, I have got a full-on squat rack in my room. I panic bought the squat rack when I thought we were going into lockdown a few weeks ago. Turned out to be a good decision. I thought maybe I'd made a wrong decision by ordering in this massive squat rack, but it's come in useful so far, because when we did get locked down, I was the only person sitting happy thinking, well, I mean, I know I have equipment anyway, so I'm okay. And now that I've developed a much stronger relationship with Nottingham Strong as the president of this society, it's just meant that I was high on the priority list when it came to renting equipment. So I got first pick of everything pretty much. got to take home what I wanted. So I am now training in my room with a squat rack, 2 thick rubber mats on the floor, and all of my plates in the corner. So yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I saw your latest one. And well, then out of entertainment, have you had any failed lifts since you've been lifting in your bedroom?
I mean, I haven't had any failed lifts, but I have had close calls because it feels different lifting in here than it does lifting in a gym. I'm thinking about going through the floor constantly, and because I'm on the 3rd floor of my house, and this house is sort of falling apart, being a student house, it's not obviously uh, the most structurally stable place in the world. We've had radiators randomly fall off the walls at times, but you know, that comes with the situation. It is actually one of the nicer, much nicer student houses in the area. And so when I am actually doing my squats and things, it can feel a bit cramped being in a room. So sometimes I might, for example, get, I don't know, lightheaded or something, just being in this tight space. And because the floor is carpeted underneath these mats instead of a solid floor, it feels slightly squishy. So it can feel a bit different, especially when I start to go heavy, which hasn't been a problem just yet. But then equally with my deadlifts, the fear of dropping it is always there, because I know I can just let it down if I'm getting tired or whatever on a normal training session. But here, I'm not trying to drop it onto my roommate's head or onto the roof that's going to crash through their ceiling. So I try my best to sort of keep it easy. Today, actually, I happened to fall backwards on one of my lifts, which meant that it did come banging down, but everything was fine in the end. So we're still going, but my coach will no longer be putting heavy deadlifts into my program, because we've got it changed for the next few weeks of training. Hopefully only 2 more weeks of being locked up, but yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to get a bit of light on that kind of idea. And in terms of kind of your future plans or goals for powerlifting, I know that you obviously you did a kind of a mock meet again in the last kind of couple of weeks, which kind of set you up probably with a little bit of an appetite to realise you can go chasing some big kind of records. So how does that impact your future plans, and do you plan to kind of keep in the powerlifting in the kind of mid to immediate future?
Yeah, because now up to this point, it's always been the short-term, mid-term goal of catching up with the rest of the lifters in my weight class in this country. Because now I'm an 83 kilogram lifter. I've always been trying to catch up with these boys for the past 1.5, 2 years. I've been trying to catch up with everyone. It's always been sort of lifting in the shadows. People don't really know who I am, and just racing to try and be one of the better lifters, at least, if not the best of the juniors in the country. And now I'm at the point after that mock meet where if it had been official, I would have been ranked at 3rd in the country overall, rather than just in the juniors, which means obviously also all the seniors, the open men. And so that sort of really given me the knowledge, just the drive to know that I can push it a lot further. And so in the short term, I would like to get this total official as soon as COVID allows us to have meets again, get this total official, and hopefully compete get this total official, win the British junior nationals, become British champion as a junior, and then move on and compete at Worlds. Somehow Worlds would also be a short-term goal, because it would technically, or it should be, next September. And at Worlds, I would ideally like to win Worlds as well, seen as currently, in terms of where the 83 class is, last year the winning total for the 83 juniors was 737.5 kilos, and at my mock meet I totaled 746. So it's looking up and being like, okay, I could actually do this. I do know, obviously, the rest of my weight class, in terms of the world right now, is moving ahead as I'm moving ahead. And so I know the boys, they're going to be competition. But at this current moment, I know that in the country, at least, my main competition was there competing, doing his mock meet on the same day that I did mine. I know that in the country, I am currently at least ahead, quite far ahead. And so I now have to look towards sort of international competition for where my next goals are going to lie. In the midterm, I would like to hit an 800 kg total. That ideally would be end of 2021, maybe mid 2022, just to take on the world record total, which was set by a guy called John Hack. He's thought of to be, well, currently one of the best powerlifters there has been, and he set an 813 kilogram total back in 2016. And so I'd like to take that. Looking at the current progress that I've been on, the trajectory, I've put on quite a decent amount of kilos onto my total, which just means that although it sort of seems like, why should I be able to do that when everyone else has come and tried and failed up to this point, at least, I can also see the fact that while I may think that it's difficult and other people haven't done it, there's no reason why it shouldn't be me. Seen as it has been progress the way it's been up to this point, and everyone says there's no way that you're going to continue making this progress, but it's the same thing that they said a year ago, and it continued. So hopefully that does keep pushing. And then I guess the long-term goal is to win the senior weight of the seniors of the weight class internationally. But yeah.
So it's definitely something that you're also going to look to pursue outside of university. Is powerlifting something that you could do as a full-time pursuit, or are you looking, as you're kind of getting out of university, as a kind of combination? You could go and have some kind of full-time job, or is the powerlifting got legs to be done as a kind of job?
Powerlifting definitely doesn't have legs to be done as a job just yet, to be fair. I know that I'm definitely going into law when I get out of uni, but the goal would also be to continue powerlifting. Powerlifting has recently just started up with this. So I don't know if you know the company SBD, but SBD develops knee sleeves and a lot of other things that obviously weightlifters, CrossFitters, Olympic weightlifters use. And so they develop knee sleeves, singlets, etc. And they have a lot of money and backing behind them. And so they have recently, or at least last year, in I want to say it was going to be May. May was going to be the first Sheffield meet. And the Sheffield obviously was going to be held in Sheffield over here in the UK. And it was going to be a thing where they invite all of the best powerlifters in the world to this meet. Everyone gets invited, flies over here, and they compete against one another. But it was going to be the first of its kind in that it was going to be one person from each weight class competing against each other on sort of a ratio basis. And right. So instead of an 83 competing against another 83, it would be an 83 competing against a 66 and seeing who's strongest pound for pound. And the winners, there was, I think, £500,000 in prize money for grabs. And so that is now making it seem like powerlifting could someday soon be something that you could do completely on its own, because currently prize money and things does happen, but that happens in the untested divisions where people are allowed to take drugs and steroids and everything, as opposed to the federation that I lift in, where you are regularly drug tested, randomly drug tested, and obviously drugs are not acceptable in any way. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then in terms, just as a last kind of question as we round up, how do you kind of judge the impact that your, almost your sporting background at school, and how has that impacted you in the last few years in terms of now pushing towards not just the top end of your sport, hopefully, locally and nationally, but also internationally as your kind of long-term goal?
I would say sports really does help, especially with a sport like powerlifting, just because, especially being at like school, doing PE lessons, just competing in general at school in different sports teams, it gave me that basis to sort of a sporting basis, just an athletic basis to push me in the sport. That alone would have developed my ability as a powerlifter, just having the build and the makeup to be able to then go on and lift heavy weights without ever having lifted weights before necessarily. But then equally, it put me in the correct mindset, because it can be difficult doing 2-3 hour sessions, just repetitive, just doing the same thing over and over again. But having the mindset and the drive that I got from being so competitive in these lessons, in these competitions, in these school teams, that competitive edge wouldn't, or maybe wouldn't have been developed in anywhere near the same way as it has been, just because being with all the boys, being with Youssef, Matthew, all the rest of them, like competing against everyone on a regular basis, just made us all so driven to want to do well. And so that just means that no matter how much I'm hating my sessions, it's not comparable to running a bleep test in 50-degree heat. And I know that in the back of my mind. And so I'm thinking, right, well, just suck it up, get through this session, and then we'll get better and move on to the next one. And I think that really is such a big driver. It divides people who played sport and didn't in this sport, who played sort of team sports back when they were younger. And whenever people go, oh yeah, did you play like any team sports when you were younger? I'll go, oh yeah, like been playing since I was like 4 or whatever. And they'll go, of course you did. And that just goes to show that it is a really well thought of thing within powerlifting. And it just generally, I know that it definitely helped me 100%.
Good. Well, I think I've probably grilled you enough, and I am aware it's now 1 a.m. in the UK. Not that this is advocated to our younger listeners to stay up this late. Nathan, being on lockdown, has insisted that his schedule has changed, so I'm not keeping him awake. He's probably going to be awake for another hour. But no, really good to catch up, Nathan. And I must say that it's really positive to hear from a former student who has gone on to be so successful, both academically, but also continue down a sporting journey. And obviously you've got plans to keep that going for years to come. So happy to hear. Great to see you're looking well. And yeah, I wish you all the best for the future plans, and I'll be following them closely. Where can people follow your journey if they want to see what you're up to?
So at the Calf Hunter on Instagram, that is it, because of the small calves. So yeah, that is where to find me.
Okay, I'll share that in the show notes as well for anybody of our listeners that have got Instagram. So yeah, that is the Calf Hunter, because Nathan is underselling himself as having no calves, but obviously having muscles elsewhere. Right, well, great to hear from you again, Nathan, and yeah, wish you all the best. Take it easy.
Thank you very much. You too.
Nice one, Nathan. Cheers, buddy. Thank you.